What's good, Ivy Nation? Welcome to the Week 3 edition of Upon Further Review. That's Bryan. I'm Vince. And we are here to talk about Notre Dame's decisive 66-7 victory.
They did
over
win,
Purdue.
right? Like
They
I'm
did.
looking at the message board and
Oh my
Twitter and some
gosh.
of the people in the chat now. They did win yesterday. I didn't dream that.
No, you didn't
just
dream it.
Just making sure.
It is a
Okay,
very
cool.
classic case of you're just never going to make everybody happy.
That's very true.
That's really all there is to it.
True.
I mean,
Very
just some
true.
negative people. Look, you can make a negative spin out of literally anything.
I found that out.
And people will do it.
I have literally found that out.
Good.
Literally
grief.
found that. It was a good win. It was a fun win, Vince. I think a lot of people needed that. There are a lot of Notre Dame fans that look, nothing that happened yesterday erases what happened the week before, but we could continue to dwell on the week before. We can say, hey, look, let's focus on the present. Hopefully they get those things figured out. But, man, very good win yesterday, dude. You talk about needing a bounce back. Whew.
Yeah.
We got a pretty good bounce back.
Oh, 100%. And that was
worst loss in Purdue history. I heard that today.
And that's saying
Purdue
something.
has never lost by 59 points before.
Right. That's saying something.
Is what I heard a Purdue guy reporting today.
That I've heard that from a couple of different sources, so I believe that is accurate, and it's also like the biggest win following a loss for Notre Dame, or most points scored following a loss for Notre Dame since like 1908 or something. I mean, just lots of crazy records.
It was most points. It was the biggest win margin of victory against a Power 5. Tied the biggest margin of victory since 1996, and it was the biggest since 1996 against a Power 5 team. They beat Bowling Green by 59 in 2019. That's a MAC team. The only MAC team that Notre Dame has actually had an easy time with in the last 10 years.
That's fair.
But and then it was their biggest. I think someone on the board today posted that the broadcast said it was their biggest margin of victory on the road since 1973. I believe, and then you had your point. So when you're doing things that haven't been done since like Lee Boltz and Eric Parsegian was the coach of Notre Dame, again, that's a good thing, and that's not to be dismissed simply because you're still mad about what happened the week before, right? We can walk and chew gum at the same time,
correct,
and say things still have to be addressed. But boy, did they address them! Like, what did you want from the team this Saturday? Like, what was going to happen that was going to make you not complain this week?
Bingo,
right? Like. Yes, things need to get fixed. They're 2-1, not 3-0. But this was the answer that we hoped we would see from Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
How would a team that played with no heart, no pride in 1 week respond?
And we got a great answer.
Responded and incredibly perfect.
Yeah.
Like if you were so Riley Leonard's got to go 19 for 19 for 497 yards.
Mm-hmm.
The defense can't allow a first down the entire game, or we're going to be mad. Look, this team came out and responded well, Vince, and that's absolutely something that we can that I'm excited about. Now it's and we'll dive into it this week. Now it's building time, right? It's build upon that, and we'll find out if they can do that. But for this Saturday, what we're breaking down today, there was a lot of good stuff on Saturday, man. A lot of good stuff.
So we are going to. We've been kind of feeling out kind of upon further review and kind of how we wanted to do it this year. And we wanted to tweak it a little bit, and we weren't exactly sure how we were going to tweak it. But one of the things that we're doing differently this year is with the post-game show, right? And so, Bryan is not really part of the post-game show. He came on the first 2 weeks and, for good reason. There was a big win in week 1 and terrible loss in week 2. And that's a cathartic way for Bryan to get on and talk about what he saw.
Well, you know what else helped too, Vince, is I actually got to listen to your guys' show while I was in the press box, and I was like just dominating the chat, like banned, muted, deleted.
Right.
Because I was shocked at how many, like I knew there'd be some, and to a degree there should still be some. Like I had this reaction on Saturday, Vince. It was, okay, boy, I would have just liked a little bit of this last weekend.
Sure.
And we're having a different conversation. That's a totally fair response to what we saw on Saturday. But you should be able to do that and still enjoy what you saw.
Right.
And people say, well, are we not asked the things that need to get better? Of course you can. But if that's all you're focusing on, then yeah, that's kind of a little bit of a, maybe you have a perspective problem. But listening to the show, the big reason for it, Vince, was I thought you guys did a great job. Like my dad told me last week, you guys did a great job, but which just meant a lot because my dad's normally doesn't like shows that I'm not on.
I mean, that's what I mean.
But he said you guys did a great. He's like, telling me Vince made this point, Ryan made this point, Sean made this point, Trevor made this point. But listen to you guys talk. It was very good, very, very good. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
I stayed in the press box. I finished my articles. I drove home. I relaxed.
Right.
A little bummed, you guys. I mean, only went 3 hours. If you guys could have waited another hour and a half, I could have got on, for super chats.
I know, right? So
it was definitely it was good to not be on there. So now we can focus on the upon further review being where I give a lot of my thoughts.
Correct. And so that is kind of what we're going to do from here on out. So Bryan is not going to be making appearances on the post-game show pending something crazy happening in a game that he wants to talk about, obviously. But from here on out, you're going to get your first opportunity to hear Bryan's verbal thoughts upon further review. And, obviously he puts out his observations and everything in written form and all of that. But, there's nothing like the podcast form and the YouTube live form and all of that. And so upon further review is going to be Bryan, your opportunity to talk to everybody about what you saw and your thoughts about the game and all of these different things. And that's how we are going to kick off every upon further review moving forward is going to be, Bryan's thoughts on the game and talk offense, defense, special teams, whatever happens to go through the noggin is coming out in the first segment of Upon Further Review. So that is how we are going to shape the Upon Further Review show from here on out. And so let's kick it off, Bryan. Again, you didn't have a chance to speak your mind last night. And so here is your opportunity to talk about Notre Dame's win over Purdue.
So obviously I'll share my thoughts now in just kind of a somewhat of a quick format. And then we'll do our keys to victory breakdown and then kind of give some overviews and talk about some key moments. But really the big thing, Vince, was we needed to see how this team was going to respond. Like nothing that happened on Saturday, nothing was going to eliminate the prior week because you could win 755 to nothing and your record was still going to be 2-1, right? There was no margin of victory that says, okay, we're going to retroactively add 3 points from this week. You scored enough that we're going to retroactively add 3 points from this week to last week's game. You're still 2-1. And so you can't fix that. But what you can say is, but how do you respond?
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond to what's going on? You're going on the road. You're playing a Big Ten team. It was hotter, I felt, just being there. I was hotter yesterday than I was in College Station. And it was 3:30 kickoff. I mean, the sun was beating down because, remember by the time the A&M game kicked off, the sun was kind of not really beaming on it. I mean, yesterday, Vince, for the first full quarter, I mean, the sun was beaming onto the stadium.
Yes.
Or onto the field. And I'm thinking, how is this team going to prepare?
It was hot.
And how are they going to handle this opponent? Are they going to, and when a week like this happens, you hear all types of stuff from quote unquote sources or people reach out because they heard from somebody who heard something. I had people say, oh, it was a great week of practice. And other people say, oh, it was a terrible week of practice. You just never know how a team is going to respond. And as I've said a bunch of times, just because you had a good week of practice doesn't mean you're going to play well in a game. And just because you have a bad week of practice, mean you're going to play. I still remember Dabo Swinney coming in here in 2022 after the game. He was like, we had a great week of practice. I mean, they just kicked our butts. When Notre Dame beat them by 3 touchdowns in 2022. So you really don't know.
And as a coach, you've seen it a million times, right?
Yes.
You have a terrible week of practice, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, the light goes on. The light switch gets turned on the game day, and it's like, okay.
Vince, I've joked about this. There's weeks where we couldn't complete passes on RVA.
Right. Exactly.
And then you get to Saturday and you light your opponent up. And then there's weeks where it's like, I don't know if the ball hit the ground this week.
Right.
And then you get to Saturday and you can't complete a pass beyond 5 yards. It's just, you never really know. But what you want to know is, okay, what was the energy level? What was the focus like? And we don't know what that was like. But what we do know, however, is that this team came out on Saturday and responded very well. Purdue wins the toss. They defer. Notre Dame starts with the ball, which I was actually kind of happy about because I wanted to see how this group especially was going to answer. Mm-hmm. And I want to know who's going to be a quarterback because, we're watching the pregame stuff. And I wrote an article last week saying, if Riley Leonard's shoulder is as bad as we're hearing, they need to sit him and let him rest and heal his body and heal his mind. Come out during pregame. He looked sharper than he was in previous weeks, but not like, oh man, Riley's going to have a day. 3/4 speed. I mean, just typical pregame stuff. You see quarterbacks during pregame, Vince. but he took all the first team reps. You're like, okay, either they're screwing with Purdue or he's going to start. And the way he was getting reps, it was very clear he was going to start.
Mm-hmm.
So you come out that first quarter and you're like, okay, well, here we go. Let's see how this unit responds, because there was the thing I wanted to see was what kind of pride did the offense have? What kind of fight did the offense have? And then defensively, like, okay, is there finger pointing, or are they going to say, hey, we just got to focus on our job? But I really felt like the offense needed to come out and make a statement, not only to Purdue, but even more importantly, to Notre Dame, to themselves, that, hey, we are pretty good. And then, hey, defense, we're not going to leave you hanging out to dry again this week. And we'll get into more of the fast start. But, Vince, it was very early. It was very evident right away that things were going to be different. And just all phases of the game, it was evident right away. Within the first series or two, and we'll get into some specifics on defense later, it was very clear that this team came to play physically. Now, we didn't know if they were going to execute throughout the game. Yeah, they went down and scored in the first drive offensively. Okay, they did that against Northern Illinois, right? Like, that doesn't tell us a whole lot, you know? I mean, so what are they going to do in drives 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6? But you could see the energy level was there. You could see this was a group of guys that weren't waiting on something bad to happen. There was, didn't have fight. They weren't playing, quote unquote, ticked off to the point where they were playing out of control. You can see that sometimes, Vince. I'm sure everyone that's coached has had those moments where your team's upset about what happened and they come out undisciplined. Their anger turns into a lack of discipline. So you're getting late hit penalties and things like that.
Emotion takes over in a bad way.
They came out sharp on offense and answered very clearly. But they're also, Vince, the thing that I took away was, and I actually texted somebody about this after the game. I said, look, that was a vintage Mike Dembrot game plan. It's like, that's what we were like, okay, that's the guy that you expected to see based on what he was at LSU, based on what he did at Cincinnati, based on what he did at Notre Dame. And, it's just, I wanted to see, would he make the changes necessary to get this offense going? And we did. And I know we're going to dive into some specifics about it, so I won't dive too much into that, Vince. But you just saw an offensive coordinator that said, hey, I'm taking this game on me. I didn't put my guys in position to be successful, and we're going to change that. And we're going to come out early and do things to get this offense rolling, to build some confidence. And they did that. And they came out and played well. And I think that we saw some mental toughness from the offensive players. We saw some mental toughness from Riley Leonard, because that kid took an emotional and mental beating last week on Saturday. And I don't know if that was as hard as the beating he took Sunday to Friday from the fan base. And I'm not criticizing the fan base.
Media.
I mean, fans always, yes, and media. Fans always have emotional reactions. It's very few fans that take things personally. Yeah. And I don't think bench Riley Leonard, he sucks, is personal. That's a take. It's not necessarily the way that I would phrase it, but it's not personal. There were some people that, always take that. That's how I'm talking about it. I'm okay with fans being pissed off with what they saw last week. I think he took a little bit too much of the brunt of it.
Yeah.
But
agreed.
He played really bad. That's a life of a quarterback. When you play well, hey, you're the talk of the town. When you don't play well, you're the talk of the town. How would he respond? Right? This is a much different stage than what he's used to being at Duke. And I thought he responded well. His game still needs a lot of work. There's no doubt about it. And when you look at different aspects of the more downfield reads, he had 2 mistakes yesterday. He was still rushing through his reads way too quick, right? And you can just watch him on film, Vince, where he just goes away from reads way too fast. And then he's also still kind of aiming some of the downfield throws. You look at the throw to Jaden Thomas on the deep end cut, which is a really well-designed play. They did a zip motion, ran a pivot route. Jaden Thomas ran out like he was running a slot fade and then broke in. So it was like a sort of a tendency breaker off that look. So it looked like a slot fade.
They've run the slot fade a few times, yeah.
He sees the safety coming down. Riley the decision was great. I was encouraged by the decision because the safety's coming down. Riley knows that guy can't make a play on an in cut coming behind it. That guy does not know that in cut is coming because Notre Dame hadn't shown that look. He makes the right read. Ball's thrown pretty much on time, but then he aims it and it drives right into the ground instead of really snapping it off and getting it out there, right? So missed opportunity. The slot fade route, I mean, there's nothing he can do about that. The offensive tackle literally jumps into his chest.
Right.
And so you kind of look at that, but there was a couple plays, scrambling around, not seeing Jeremiah Love downfield. I'm not as upset about that. Like, people that never played quarterback are like, you should see that. Like, okay, if you've played quarterback, yeah, you should see that, but it's not as easy as you think it is, especially when there's that time of the day where I'm not going to make excuses. You need to see that, but I thought he should have stuck with that read initially, because they're running basically rub routes and they had been running slides all day. And so it was actually a great play call, Vince. So they ran sort of like that same rub look, and Love is going out, but he's running a wheel, and they're flat footing his route. Like, Riley needs to see that and stick with it and not throw on the scramble. He needs to throw that ball from the pocket.
Yeah.
Let him clear and then just loft it up the sideline and run it. So those things still need to get improved. But a lot of other things he did a lot better. He was more decisive in the RPO game. I know we'll break that down a little bit more. Ran with a little bit more speed. I thought he looked faster on Saturday running, which was part of that's because Purdue's not very fast. But I just thought he physically looked faster. Yeah. But he didn't look shook. And that was key. And I think credit to Mike Denbrock for giving him some nice, easy, early reads to get him out. A lot of stuff we talked about, which we'll dive into in the keys to victory, but that was important. The offense needed to see Riley come out and make plays, but also be confident. Yes, things got to get fixed and corrected. And, there's a go ball that I thought KK Smith smoked a dude off the line that I would like to have seen him read that throw and get it out there. Steve Angeli missed a couple like that too. But it's like they saw him making plays. And that's the thing we talked about last week. Guys, he was never going to be confused for Bo Nix, 75% passer and all that. He's a playmaker. And you have a guy that honestly, if they would have benched him, it would have been understandable. I didn't say they should have benched him. I said they need to rest him, because you need that kid healthy mentally and physically to be the team you want to be this year. He was beat down last week. But he came out this week, Vince, and I thought was just a lot more, hey, I got this, guys. Yeah. And I think the team responded to that. I thought that was huge.
Let me ask you a question, and obviously this is going to be your opinion, because we are not in the Goog. We don't have an IB office in the Goog where we get to listen in on everything. But what do you think changed from a Mike Denbrock situation, right? From his perspective? We saw some Mike Denbrock-ish type stuff in week 1, and then I feel like we saw nothing in week 2, to then it was like, yes, this is a Mike Denbrock offense in week 3. Your speculation on what changed and allowed Mike Denbrock to then, in week 3, like, hey, this is who Riley Leonard is, this is what we need to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it was like a completely different called offense in week 3 than it was in week 1 and week 2.
Number one, I'm going to respond to something in the chat. My guy Troy said, I think they should have benched him last week. They would have won. I don't think they should have benched him last week. I think they should have pulled him because he was clearly injured. There's a difference. And I do think if they would have pulled him and put in another quarterback, they might have won last week. I do think that, which is why it was even more important that Riley bounced back this week. And to your point, it was imperative that Mike Denbrock do things to get him going. And by doing so, Vince, it was stop, this is our offense, and we're trying to transition Riley into our offense.
Right.
This was a game plan where Mike Denbrock said, this is what 13 can do, and this is what he's not great at. Right now, this is what he's comfortable with.
Right.
And so what did we see? Things that we talked about on Thursday and Tuesday last week, and I talked about on Wednesday. Move the pocket. Right? That was something we did not see a lot of in the previous game. Move the pocket. This is a kid that is not just does not need to be sitting back and just throwing everything from the pocket. I'd still like to see a little bit more play action, but we did see some play action on Saturday. That was good. They did things where they kind of got the RPO game going. Part of it also was you see the motions, the shifts, the movement, the read zones, things like that. But part of it too, Vince, was when you look at Riley's performance on Saturday, part of it too was just he played better. Like,
oh yeah,
the one thing he'd been struggling with, his decision making in the RPO game the first 2 weeks was not good. We talked about it after the Texas A&M game, and of course we talked about it last week. He did a much better job of making decisions in the RPO game, but I thought they did some things to kind of have Purdue on their heels. So we saw a lot of different motions. They would motion like one particular play. They with to Riley, they motioned Jeremiah Love out.
Mm-hmm.
This is after the touchdown. They motioned Jeremiah Love out of the backfield and then ran quarterback counter. So it opens up the box. It gets Purdue out of their heavy box and gets you a body on a body, and Riley goes out and makes a play. So they were doing more things to create space for him. And then that was also part of the offensive game plan, to get guys in space more, which they weren't doing in the past. They did more levels concepts. They were doing post-snap switch stuff, Vince, which, we wanted to see more of. Some of the third down throws, there was great intentionality behind what they were doing, using motion to get guys free, using motion to get guys into matchups. We'll talk about the 3rd and 6 conversion to Mitchell Evans, not the second where he made the catch and run on 3rd and long, but the 3rd and 6 to set up, I think, their second touchdown, about how schematically that was a good place to be. So we'll get into some of those things, but it really came down to Mike Denbrock did two things. And it wasn't just about Riley Leonard. It was also, I need to make sure 4 and 24 are getting the football more. So it wasn't just let's just change our entire offense to fit Riley Leonard. This was an offense that was also geared towards 4 and 24 special.
Right. Yep.
We got to get him back together. And I also think we can't discount having a healthy Mitchell Evans that can run block and pass block. Because remember, first 2 games, Mitchell was basically just in there to pass plays. So it was a very easy tendency. Hey, 88's in the game. They're probably throwing here.
Right.
Saturday, he was healthy enough they could do both. And 7 catches for 85 yards for the tight ends. The offense is a whole lot different when the tight end is more involved both ways. So, and part of it too, Vince, was just guys played better. The tight ends, I thought, were mediocre blocking the first 2 games. They were great on Saturday against Purdue. And then, of course, they made plays in the pass game. So, yes, part of it's Mike Denbrock did this was a great game plan, great play, great feel for the game for Mike Denbrock. But the other part is the players went out and executed at a high level.
It's fair.
On things they were not executing on the first 2 weeks. Part of that's okay, game plan, put them in better positions. But the other part of it is I saw a bunch of players that took a little bit of, hey, we got to do our thing too. We can't be blaming other people. We got to do our thing. We got to come out. And I don't know what their motivation was. Maybe they were mad at us. Maybe they were mad at themselves, whatever.
Right.
Maybe they were just like, hey, we're trying to go out and be the best version of ourselves. I don't know what it was, but they played with a little bit of little extra something on Saturday offensively where, they were finishing blocks off, guys that hadn't been blocking well. I mean, just like the first play of the game. I mean, first touchdown of the game. It's great run, great call, great blocking, great run. It's a 20-yard gain if Bo Collins doesn't destroy the guy he's going against and block him into the sideline. There was no room for Jeremiah Love to cut back inside of Bo Collins' block inbounds and still score because the linebacker would have been there. But because Bo took that guy into the sideline,
into the
Jeremiah could stay right up the sideline and go for a touchdown.
And not break speed.
That's about pride, dude. That's not about technique. That's not about, who am I? That's like, I'm pissed off. I want to go out here and dominate you every single play. And they did that on Saturday.
Yeah.
And it was it was comical, Vince. I mean, I started laughing when Darian Price broke that 7-yard in the press box. I started laughing out loud. Literally, because I'm like, dude, they were trying to run the clock out.
Yes.
And housed it for 70. I mean, they took their shot on first down, got the holding penalty. Now it's 1st and 20, and it's
from the 30. 1st and 20 from the 30.
Right. And you're like, okay, let's just run it and get out of here.
And I have no problem with that, by the way. There was like 16 seconds left.
They took their shot on first down, exactly, and then see him house it, and you're just like, this team is serious today, and they're very talented, and that's the final takeaway, Vince. And then just defensively, real quick, there's not a lot to talk about defensively, except 2 things. No, the defense showed heart. They did not play the way they needed to on Saturday. They played like they were frustrated with themselves, not offense. They looked like they were frustrated themselves, and they took it out on Purdue. Like that, they were play with a chip on their shoulder. And then the final takeaway for me, there were some young defensive linemen that stepped up that they need to step up. But I'm just sitting there watching the fourth quarter, and I'm saying, when this group of players are dominating the two deep, this team is going to be sick on defense because there's so much athleticism and talent in the freshman and sophomore class. And that was on display in the first half too. Christian Gray, Bubakar, Adon Schuler, Drake Bowen, Kingston. But then in the second half, when it's just them, you're like, when these kids figure it out technically, schematically, boy, this team is going to be scary good on defense. And, I mean, if you think about it, there were some veterans that made plays on Saturday, no doubt, but there was a lot of freshmen and sophomores balling on Saturday on both sides of the ball, Vince.
Yes. Yeah. No, there's no doubt about it. And that was the fun part of the second half, was just watching these young guys just play with reckless abandon. And I mean that in the most positive way possible, is they were just playing. Like, they were just out there playing. And it was within the defense, and it was, Al Golden still calling the defense the way he was calling it in the first half, even though it was a bunch of guys that haven't really played together on the football field in a meaningless game or in a meaningful game, right? I shouldn't say meaningful game. I should say in a game, period. These guys haven't played together, right? And so now they're getting that opportunity. Al Golden is calling the game the way he normally does, and these guys are just, they're playing. And it was really fun to watch. So I completely agree with you there.
Both sides of the ball, Vince, played. They were designed to fit who they are, not who the coaches want them to be.
Yes.
And when that game plan was that, you saw the talent take over.
Right.
And, kudos to Mike Denbrock for quickly recognizing that. Because what's funny is I was kind of upset about it. And a buddy of mine made the point. He goes, I don't know this, but just for argument's sake, do you think part of that's on Riley? So, well, what do you mean on Riley? Like, how's Riley? And he's like, no, think about it. Don't you think that was part of the conversation to decide to come to Notre Dame, was you wanted to be more of a pro style? I said, I don't know that for a fact, but I know that's what a lot of these guys do this.
That's why Sam came. We know that. Right.
And so I was like, yeah, that's a good point. And so Denbrock was just like, okay, we're not going to do that. We're going to coach her about who you are, not who we or you or whoever wants you to be.
Right.
And I said this, look, what we saw Saturday from Notre Dame is not good enough. If you repeat that from now to the rest, this is exactly who you are.
Yep.
I don't think it's good enough to compete for a championship. Although I had people tell me you can't beat Georgia that way. I said, well, you could have beat yesterday's version of Georgia easily.
Yes.
The way you played. But
Georgia didn't play well.
But Georgia's not going to be that in December.
Correct.
Like, when it's playoff time, you're going to get the best version of Georgia.
Right.
But here's what I do know. It's good enough to beat everyone else on their schedule. Now the key is, okay, you have the floor. You can never go beneath this. And I'm not talking 66-7. I'm talking about the principles behind it. Game playing around who you are, playing hard, being disciplined, those type of things. Some weeks it's going to look like this, and some weeks it's going to be a 14-point victory. Some weeks you may only win by a touchdown, but you're going to beat whoever you play from here on out. In order to get to the next level, there are things that have to get built upon in every phase of the game, and that's going to be the next step for Notre Dame. This is a great foundation-laying victory because of the things we talked about. Now it's like, okay, let's build on it. That's going to be the next key.
Right. So that's going to do
this. This is a great point by NH. She says, what do you think the November version of Notre Dame will be if they build on this? And that's going to be the key. Like,
right.
She nails it. Like, that's going to be the key. You can't – the key coming out of this game is, in some ways, it confirms what we already know about Marcus Freeman, which is his highs are super high.
Incredibly high.
And people say, well, they haven't – it's not just about the teams that you beat. You're setting records. You're doing things that Notre Dame has never scored 40 points more in more games in the season than they did last season. Ever. And it's by like 3 games. I think the most I could find going back 50 years was like 6 or 7, I think. 6 is what I remember. This team did it 9 times. So it's highs are like you just, yes, Purdue's not great, but you destroyed them in a way that they have never been beaten before, and in a way that Notre Dame team hasn't beaten somebody like this in decades. Now it's okay, but now avoid this.
Correct.
Stay here. And that's going to be the key.
Right.
To the next step for Notre Dame. And to NH's point, I mean, again, she nailed it. It's okay. Can you build on this? And if you can, this team can be scary good. It can be scary good, but it only happens if you put NIU in the rear view. And I don't mean us as fans not talking about it anymore. I mean, as a team, the things that led to that and resulted in that have to be put in the rear view. Those don't creep back in again, if that makes sense. Do that, and then fans won't boo you anymore. Fans won't get mad at you anymore. Fans won't cancel their, but a buddy of mine's like, yeah, we were doing an Airbnb this year, and like half the games that we had people scheduled for, they called and canceled like the weekend of I get it. So, if we see this team consistently, Vince, it's going to be a fun remainder of the year. Doesn't erase last weekend, but it's still going to be fun. Still going to be fun.
That's going to do it for segment 1 of Upon Further Review. Make sure you hang out with us. We've got much more to come. But in the meantime, hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And of course, jump on boards.irishbreakdown.com, because there's going to be some more video breakdowns and things of that nature starting tomorrow.
Tuesday,
Yep. Starting tomorrow. That is going to be the normal way we go about doing things. And so you're not going to get it unless you're on the boards. You got to be on the premium message board.
When Notre Dame has a game like last week, because I could not bring myself to.
No, that's fair. I mean,
doing a breakdown of it.
I'm
just being honest. Just being honest.
I totally understand that. So make sure you get on the boards, guys. It's money well spent. Boards.irishbreakdown.com.